We might as well start talking about the number one sensation across the nation. You know the one, the adaptation that's got everybody talking, twisting, and turning in their graves. That their old Mindy Kaling Velma adaptation that people seem to be so adamant about and yelling about, me and literally everybody and their mother in the Discord about the rule of quote-unquote no hate watching. But yeah, here we are. I think we heard about this sometime like maybe 2 to 3 months ago. I don't remember. There was one trailer that came out that sort of alluded as a massive joke against people who would look at this in a wrong way. There was a joke about Velma saying, well, at least Judy Jetson is white. It was like a in-universe meta adaptation joke that I think went over kind of okay with me. And I was like, if it's a bit more self-aware in what it is and is able to call itself out, I think I might enjoy it a lot more, because unlike a lot of people, I do generally enjoy meta humor. This show does that in such a way that it is so mindlessly fucking boring and also just outright unnecessary at times that I, for the life of me, cannot figure out who this is for, why it was made, or even what it's supposed to be about at the end of the day. The headcanon that I've been subscribing to over the course of the past couple of days since we've been talking about it, and I've actually forced my roommates to watch this alongside me, is that this was supposed to be an original story that Mindy Kaling had gone up to HBO Max executives with, probably maybe more live action, and they turned around and she probably said the words, like Scooby-Doo and Velma, and then there was an executive somewhere that heard, we own those rights, so if you want this to be a sure thing and that people are going to definitely put their eyes on it, we can absolutely allow you to do whatever you want with the Scooby-Doo rights. And that seems to have been the case here. Mainly because a whole lot of what happens in this show so far is so far removed from what I would even consider Scooby-Doo and their antics that it's actually kind of ridiculous that it isn't just its own unique show. And on some level, I would almost feel like people would give it shit, but there would be literally nowhere near as much hate thrown its way if it was just an original fucking show. And I think the other thing coming away from it that is so perplexing is that I'm not entirely sure who the show is trying to make fun of half the time. There are jokes that land just as equally poorly on either side of the political spectrum. I know that every single thing doesn't need to be turned into a culture war, but this does certainly seem to be the kind of show that continuously tries to feed into that. But as I walked away from it after watching the first 2 episodes, there was a part of me that was like, there's going to be a lot of anti-SJW content creators that are going to just sort of walk away from this and have to quite literally pull from fucking nothing. Because there is like nothing to talk about. For a fucking show that doesn't shut up for more than 5 seconds, like, it is constant. This show has no room for anyone to breathe. It is just one bit after another, and each and every single one of them barely, if at all, lands half the fucking time. And I'm coming away from this like, I don't really think it was trying to push an agenda so much as it was just sort of talking about pushing an agenda and how silly that is, but not really having anything to say about that whole affair. The race switching of the characters doesn't really amount to anything. There's no real interesting dynamic that comes from it. Not to say that you need to have something interesting to justify race switching. I'm of the mindset that you don't necessarily need to adhere to something as silly as somebody's race the entire time, unless it is literally baked into the core plot of a show, which obviously for most of Scooby-Doo, no, them all being white teenagers isn't really something that is brought about or talked about in any way, shape, or form. Probably for the better after watching this, but I think even approaching this from an adaptation standpoint, it fails pretty much intrinsically throughout the entire show. Because I cannot, for the life of me, every single character here is I wouldn't even say like a mirror, like a negaverse version of themselves. They are quite literally different characters. This feels like a show that has this Scooby-Doo franchise name transplanted directly on top of it to sell subscriptions and make people like mad. And essentially the kind of discussion that's being had about it entirely is really one of the core reasonings why this even has the quote-unquote Velma name attached to it. That being said, as for the actual content of the show, basically the show's whole storyline surrounds itself around the titular character of Velma, and she is as shitty of a person as you've probably been hearing about. She's probably one of the most unlikable characters, not only in the show, but in animation history so far. And I think that this is definitely by design, because my friend Matt is a lot more my friend Matt tells me a lot about like Mindy Kaling's work. Some of it hits for him, some of it doesn't. But apparently Mindy Kaling very much writes in a very self-deprecating sense pretty much every character that she gets her hands on. The main character, if she's not playing it, if she's got at least like doing some kind of weird self-insert. He didn't say that. I'm putting that in because that's all I can think of at this moment. But he did say that Mindy Kaling's approach to comedy is far more of the self-deprecating kind, and I can definitely see that here. Velma is, by and large, one of the most depressing, and it's not even like you feel bad for her kind of thing. Like, she's just generally a piece of shit, bitchy know-it-all that they continuously are teasing the idea of there being some sort of character arc where she grows out of that, but then they sort of reel that all right back in. Like it's a bit, like it's part of the joke, and it just doesn't really work very well. And it's also, it's one of those things where it would make sense within the world that she's in for her to have such a like standoffish kind of assholish behavior, because the people around her are nowhere near better. They are far more worse for wear, but they're a lot more, I guess, inoffensive, because I guess, I don't know, the most egregious fucking change would probably be to Fred's character, where they lean into him being sort of a rich pouty white boy who doesn't know how to cut his own steak, and that's like the whole bit. Like literally the whole bit is he's just rich and white, and that's literally about it. Like I guess there's also a moment where they talk about how he has a small penis. No reason as to why that's necessarily focused in on, but I don't know. There's literally nothing interesting done with any of the characters. There's no interesting world, and it's weird because it is the kind of world that very much exclusively could only exist within a cartoon space. There's a moment that even occurs within the trailer where someone throws like one of those like school paper cutters at Velma, and that's when she walks in after having like a weird transformative thing. It's like a whole fucking thing. I don't necessarily know if you want to hear about the storyline, but someone throws this fucking paper thing at her, and then Fred catches it and then like throws it right back, but with just the blade, and cuts off some guy's leg, and that's played for as a bit like in like a later part of the episode as well. And there's just very like it's really just off-putting, because I don't necessarily know what the tone of the show is supposed to be, because the show is consistently moving at a breakneck pace with little to no actual breathing room, like, you know, how I'm talking. But it's just really frustrating, because there's actually a couple of like moments of lucidity where I would even go as far as to say this is genuinely funny. There's two bits in particular within, I want to say, the first episode that hit really hard for my roommate and I. And one of the bits is there's a funeral section for one of the girls who got murdered. By the way, it's a murder mystery. I know I keep going back and forth. I'm all over the place, but that's really how I feel with this adaptation. It's hard to talk about just one thing without having to mention something else and going back and forth with it. But there is a murder that happens. You see it within the trailer. The girl's having a funeral, and there is one of her friends is singing Genuine's My Pony. I think it's called Genuine's Pony. Jump on it. I'd forget like the lyrics of the song, but the way she's singing it, it's like really sad, and she's crying over it, and it's a really silly, dumb bit, but I like it a lot because of how absolutely silly, and like because it wasn't trying to be outwardly adult or like super offensive. It was just a stupid, dumb bit that was done for comedy. I was like, that hits way harder than half of the quote unquote adult jokes that they pepper in throughout the entirety of the 2 episodes that I watched. There's also a moment where the girls try to gang up on Velma because at the time they think that Velma's the murderer because it was in Velma's locker, blah, 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 yada, yada, yada. And they try to gang up on her in the bathroom, and Daphne's trying to talk to Velma, but every time she opens her mouth, someone is flushing the toilet. And that, obviously is a bit as old as time, but where it sort of elevates itself is the person who walks out of the toilet comes in, and you physically see them wash their hands and then go over to the air dryer and then air dry their hands, and then they just walk right back in like alongside the group of people that are trying to accost Velma. And I think it's done so well that I'm like, this is actually a really good bit and would hit a lot fucking harder if it was given a little bit more time, because even that bit is like fast forwarded. Like the worst thing that this fucking show does is that I keep talking about it and I keep going back to it because I can't put into words how fast this fucking show moves. And I'm part of me's glad about it because it means I didn't have to watch it for what felt like hours. But it's like just it's just nonstop. It's fucking tiring. There's no room to let any of the bits actually sit and have any sort of comedic value to them. And it's just like really frustrating because there could potentially be room for there to be genuinely funny moments, but I think in 2 episodes I chuckled 5 times, and 2 of the times it was more so like the audacity of the fucking situation, more so than like a joke actually landing and being relatively good. But I walk away from Velma just asking a couple of questions. One, I'm not really mad, but I wonder, there's so many people that like, and this is something I keep seeing in our Discord like frequently. There are tons and tons of people who are sitting there like, oh, don't support this, don't watch this, don't do anything like that, blah, blah, blah. And I think the only fucking reason is because the trailers are poking fun at the perceived fans or the perceived haters. And for one reason or another, everyone fucking eats that shit up and takes it hook, line, and sinker. I hate it. I hate that people can't just see something like that and go, that's dumb, I hate that they did that, and move on. There are so many people who feel so strongly about a bit that doesn't even fucking take place in the actual show. It's like something that's like an aside that's said in one part of the episode in 2. I think there's like the 420 joke. It's like, yeah, it's code for adults who watch cartoons. And it's just, there are so many people who, for whatever reason, take that one little snippet and like run off with it. I'm not saying that like Velma in any way, shape, or form deserves like any kind of I guess forgiveness for it, because it's not like the rest of the show is actually good. But I'm of the mindset that like the thing that's so much more surprising is the absolute avalanche of horrid things people are saying for a fucking property that I don't really think nobody really gives a shit about. And like, there's absolutely tons of different fucking takes on Scooby-Doo and different adaptations that people absolutely love and when they're honing in on, and there's a lot more going on there. But I feel like it's just so confusing to see so many people move so strongly by a bit that's like barely a fucking second. And I feel like they don't, like, you don't understand, like, the more you get upset, the more that you hone in on like how upset this makes you, the more it fuels them to potentially, that's why I'm saying that it's less about being mad at something and more about kind of having to approach something and being like, well, that's just bad, and then moving away from it and talking about all the things it does wrong without having to get yourself like overly emotional about something. Now, I'm not a saint when it comes to certain things that I enjoy, that like I definitely have had like a lot of things to say about. I've definitely overreacted and have been the kind of person to make, big yelling arguments about it. One of the big ones for last year was the year before last, I'm sorry, was Cowboy Bebop's the Bebop adaptation. So I definitely yelled at the top of my lungs about the horrid story changes that they made. But I think, what sounds a lot, what resounds a lot more in a situation like this is more apathy than hatred, because people absolutely feed into the hate spiral. 100%. If you just give something a shot and go, well, that's just genuinely bad, and move on and have like an opinion that you like obviously make public and you let people know, like there's a public outcry that's like, oh my God, they're ruining Velma, they're doing this, they're doing that. And it's like, guys, I really don't think that the Scooby-Doo brand is the one to fucking, the hill to die on. You know what I mean? It's just so weird to see so many people so fucking upset about this when it's like it's so innocuous, and then you actually sit down and watch the first 2 episodes and it feels like there's like this Comedy Central show about cops. It's an animated show, not in Reno 911 because that one hits. I think people Bradbury, something like that, PDB something. I don't know what the fuck it is, and I'm trying to like find out, but like it has that same sort of like weird adult humor where they think that, you know, talking about drugs, sex, and violence, and then sometimes doing a meta joke every now and again are constitute as genuine fucking like adult comedy. You know what it is? I think at the end of the day, when I watch a cartoon, an adult cartoon, especially comedic one, if I turn around and I say Family Guy's much more enjoyable, I think you're fucking up. I think you're absolutely fucking up. Like the level of fucking like humor and actual jokes, and like there are moments in Family Guy, like we make fun of the Family Guy funny moments thing a lot, but because of like Family Guy's structure and like what it does with the cutaway gags, it has a lot of potential for like really funny jokes that just come out of nowhere that hit way harder than they probably should. And that's totally a thing that's unique to Family Guy. I don't think that every single fucking adult comedy has to do that, nor am I saying that like Family Guy is the peak of adult fucking humor. But like the unfortunate fucking reality is it's kind of high up there. It's genuinely high up there. If I'm going to put Smiling Friends at the top, right? Which is, I think it hits the really good with a cross between niche internet humor and like mainstream adult humor within the adult cartoon creation space. Then I would put like Family Guy, honestly, a little bit below that. I really would, because they're just, and the idea that I'm turning around and telling myself that I would much rather watch an entire season of Family Guy than even 2 more episodes of this horse shit is not a good fucking look. It's never been a good look, and it just it astounds and perplexes me. But like, yeah, I come away from this just like confused. There was a tweet that I retweeted that I'm gonna paraphrase it a little bit because I don't remember the whole tweet, but it was like lefties and righties are coming out of this just as equally pissed off, and I feel like that's sort of by design and shows how just completely confused Velma's writing is. And that's sort of what I get from it. Like this show is just outwardly offensive to everybody, but it's on such a minor scale that it's not even worth talking about. I think once we kind of sit there and you give it a fair shake, and you really sit down and try to watch these episodes and go through it, and you realize that some of the best parts of the show are and we kind of get moments of it within the trailer. Velma experiences these hallucinations due to a quote-unquote triggering thing that happened in her past, and when they explain it, it's like way dumber than I thought it was going to be. But these moments are like some of the best animated and best looking parts of the show, because they feel so much more in line with like what happens in like traditional Scooby-Doo, because it actually like has really weird and cool looking monster effects going on. And I don't know, I struggle to find like who the target demographic for this was, and because it's just so utterly fucking confusing. It's unfunny, it's breakneck pace, it makes it completely hard to keep up with it, and I don't know, the only people that I can feasibly think could get pissed off about this kind of shit are the kinds of people who make this their living. You know, I'm gonna do some call outs here. It's a Gundam, The Quartering, you know, like these fucking YouTubers who sit there and make a living off of like perpetuating the culture war and trying to be like, oh, woke culture strikes again. Like, I don't even even get any whiffs of that. Like, there's a couple of like lines, throwaway lines here and there that I'm like, okay, is the show gonna actually stand on its own 2 feet and have a message worth fucking sitting there and trying to tear apart? No. Okay, then I'm not going to fuck around with this. Like, it is just saying stuff to say stuff, and it is just doing things. When people talk about pandering, like the idea of like pandering to the LGBT or pandering, like race pandering, like that, this is the literal definition of that. And it's done so in a way that doesn't even work. So I don't know. It's consistently one of the worst fucking things I've watched, and it's just also not bad enough to be like watchable for fun. It's just mediocre bad, which, as I've said time and time again on stream, but not on the channel, it's the worst kind of bad. When you are not even anywhere near the levels of like being able to hate watch and have fun with it, you know, something where you can turn around with the boys and have a good time ripping it up. It's like me and my roommates were sitting there just silent throughout most of the episodes. It was actually like frustrating. It's frustratingly bad. But yeah, final thoughts, don't even give it a shot. Not because, you know, it's fucking woke propaganda or anything, but because it literally is it's a nothing burger of a show. There's tons and tons of jokes that they throw at you and none of them hit, and there's literally no reason to engage with it as a Scooby-Doo fan. It does nothing interesting with the characters. Nothing is happening in this show, and I want it to just completely crash and burn because it refuses to take a chance on anything. It's the safest fucking adult animation I've ever seen, and somehow that makes it worse. Like, I can't stress enough how frustrating it is for this to have like literally nothing going on. We all went for a nice little dinner at the Olive Garden and then came back to my house, and we all sat down and watched some that their old Last of Us. Yeah, let's talk about it. So obviously, in terms of adaptations, the Last of Us adaptation, you probably think about it, you already knew it was going to happen. I think a lot of people seeing the trailer and kind of like keeping up with the show are already of the mindset that this adaptation, it was going to take a lot to fuck it up, because there's already a template in place for the showrunners to follow. Last of Us is one of the most cinematic experiences you can find in a video game, bar none. So fucking that up would require them to literally do what the Velma thing is doing and just approach the game story from an entirely different angle, entirely different characters, and just, I don't know, you would have to go above and beyond to fuck up a Last of Us adaptation. I think one of the bigger things would be if it lacked a budget, but obviously it doesn't. And from watching this series last night, it's pretty goddamn cool, but it also sort of comes to that place where the major question for me going into the Last of Us adaptation was, what is the point of it? Because as a video game, The Last of Us already is, like I said, very much inspired by movies and TV, so it already feels very much like I'm kind of engaging with and watching a movie all the time anyway. So why in the world would I sit there and be like, oh, well, yeah, I'll just, I'll sit here and watch The Last of Us again instead of playing the game? And thankfully they did answer that question pretty well within the first episode. There are scenes that add additional context to previous scenes within the video game. So instead of just sitting there and kind of like honing in on the if everyone remembers the intro of The Last of Us 1, it starts with Sarah, Joel's daughter, sleeping in the living room, and then Joel coming in from a long day of work, and then they have their conversation there. Whereas the episode actually starts off from the day that all of these things start happening. So we actually get a moment to turn around and see all of the craziness sort of slowly building up in the background. It does that my favorite part of the zombie apocalypse kind of films, or any sort of media. Like, I love looking at shit when it's right about to pop off. I love seeing the world just have to slowly but surely kind of acclimate itself to this new reality. I absolutely love seeing the world kind of slowly but surely like go to shit. And we got a lot of that in the first episode. It basically starts off with the journey of Sarah, waking up, making dinner for Joel or breakfast for Joel. You meet Uncle Tommy there, and then it goes through like some of her school day where she shows up and you actually see her bring the watch to get repaired. And she meets a couple there that is in charge of the shop that are like, oh no, like lock the doors, crazy shit's happening. And they're telling her that she needs to go home. And she does eventually end up going home. And this is where like, the show actually ends up taking some liberties with how the game approached the intro. And I think when now looking at what the game is and what this is, the changes they did, I think definitely work far better for a watching experience more so than say a video game. Whereas in this one, you don't get that scene of like Joel rolling into the house and the zombie barreling in through the plate glass door, or the sliding glass door rather, and then having to shoot the guy. Instead, Sarah actually walks over to the neighbor's house because the dog next door is like terrified for its life and it's banging on the window and it's like, oh, let me in. And Sarah actually goes in and sees the neighbor go down, and Joel and Tommy roll up just in time to save Sarah from the zombie there. It also actually like rewrites some of the sequence in the town, where as opposed to getting hit with another truck, an airplane fucking crashes, and one of the parts of the airplane hits the fucking building on the side, and then causes the truck to flip over. And there's a lot of moments like that within the adaptation that make it feel unique, but it doesn't actively take away from the game's like storyline. It's not a beat for beat remake, because I think that's where it would be utterly fucking useless to me, but it does have enough beat for beat scenes in it that people who have played the game before, who have just back and front and just absolutely love this fucking series, you'll definitely see lines pulled directly out from the game and like situations pulled directly out from the game, and they do it a really good justice. In terms of the casting, I'm not familiar with anybody's names other than Pedro Pascal. It's perfect. They literally hit the nail on the head for every single actor they possibly could. The little girl from Game of Thrones who plays Ellie fucking kills it. Immediately kills it out of the gate. The moment you see Ellie for the first time, that just sheer piece of shit like teenage attitude comes straight through her, and she's just immediately lovable right from the get-go. I do think that we're going to be seeing a little bit more of a calmer, less, I guess, angry Joel. I don't know if Joel did anything terrible. He's still got like a smuggler thing going on with him and Tess. There's also like a lot more focus on the relationship and the romance between Joel and Tess. It's not like super overt, but the moment where it triggers like after the terrifying intro over Sarah's death, which is done expertly well in this one as well, by the way. It hits you just as hard as the game does. There's a moment where it's like when Joel, you kind of see his day before waking up in the game. And that's what I was talking about, like the additional context being put at play, where you're actually seeing Joel and Tess take part in the world around them, as opposed to just talking about it, which is really cool. Joel was on basically corpse duty, and we get this moment where a young kid is found from outside and he's infected, and the Fedra agents have to turn around and basically inject him with a serum to start slowly killing the kid, and basically telling the kid, oh, it's okay, you're gonna be okay, everything's gonna be fine. And then the hard cuts over to a truck that Joel was driving with the kid's corpse, and one of the people who was doing on corpse duty of burning the corpses is like, no, I can't do this is fucked up. And then you see Joel pick up the baby corpse and basically throw it into the fire. But he definitely seems like hard-edged as shit, but I don't think he's like the miserable monster that he was in the Last of Us 1 game. And that might be by design, so that like the end, whenever I'm assuming the end's going to be assuming the end's going to be very similar to the video game. And spoiler alert, Joel does a lot of murder basically to save Ellie from something. And I think that they probably can't explain away the idea of Joel being a piece of shit raider for more than like 20 to 30 years. So I don't know if that's his background yet. It might still be his background, but right now him and Tommy are they still talk basically. Like Tommy kind of joins the Firefly still, but this is something where the timeline feels a lot more faster and a lot more shorter in the sense of whereas in the game Joel hasn't spoken with Tommy for months, and in the show it's an issue of like you're trying to, his whole modus operandi is I'm trying to get a battery for a truck to go and find Tommy, which I think is going to be interesting to actually see, you know, the extent of their relationship when they do end up finding Tommy. Hopefully they don't fucking kill Tommy off. That'd be weird. I see someone in the chat talking about, did they make Sarah black in this? I think she's Hispanic, and they basically just because Pedro Pascal is Hispanic, I think they just changed the races of all the appropriate characters that would be related to him, and it changes literally nothing, and that's fantastic. These are the same exact characters. This is what I'm talking about, where like I don't think Joel being a white guy is integral to his character, and especially most of the characters, they don't have to be a particular fucking race to be the characters. So changing Joel's race to sort of acclimate and like his family to acclimate to Pedro Pascal's ethnicity is totally fine, and it takes away from nothing. And I think the one thing I'm actually really happy about is, unlike with the Velma discourse, with Last of Us, we're actually seeing a lot more people being like, wow, no, I think everyone really knocked it out of the park with the acting. And it's no one really talks about their race, which is fantastic. It's almost like, you know, I don't know, it's almost like it doesn't mean anything or something, but whatever. I came away from this being very happy with what I saw, intrigued with a lot of the extra context that was given towards certain scenes within the video game, and definitely there's different basically there's going to be like there's going to be set pieces that mirror the game in a lot of ways, but how they get there is going to be overall different. I think it's actually going to work very well for the series, and after watching the first episode, I am more than happy to continue partaking in this. I love The Last of Us. I might think The Last of Us is overrated, but it doesn't mean it's not one of the best video games out there. And seeing it actually realize in an adaptation that not only gives a shit about the overall source material, but actively expands on it in a way that really allows fans of the series and the franchise as a whole to engage with this in a way outside of just playing the games is phenomenal. I think this, as far as like video game adaptations go, this is by and large the best. Do I think that, like, am I kind of weirded out by the fact that the showrunners seem like they have never played a video game in the last fucking 20 years? Yeah, but you don't really see any of that come through, and every single bit of it, from how it's shot to how it sounds, they actually adopt a lot of the ambient OST that you find in The Last of Us pretty well within the series, and I'm very happy about that, because there's a lot of amazing ambient like combat tracks that happen in the first Last of Us that really add to the tension and elevate it to another level that is used really well in the series. So I do still kind of feel like there's not really a need for this, but unlike with The Last of Us remake, where it is part and parcel the same exact fucking experience the whole way throughout, the series at the very least feels different. It feels like there's something more going on underneath the hood, and there's going to be a lot more experiences that are unique to the series that just weren't either possible in the game, or just, you know, were glossed over, as it were. It's almost like in a way where this is going to be a really weird comparison. If you remember Scott Pilgrim, when the Scott Pilgrim versus the World movie came out, it also came out at the same time as the licensed game and the finishing of the last chapters of the Scott Pilgrim book. And Brian Lee O'Malley turned around and he said, listen, all of these are different, and if you are a big fan of Scott Pilgrim, you would do well to consume all of them, because you're going to get a different experience with each and every one of them, even though it's still at its core what I wrote and what is Scott Pilgrim's all about. And this is what I feel with the Last of Us series, that it's if you're a fan of the series, if you're a diehard fan of the game, you probably already watched the episode, you probably already fucking blown away by everything about it. But if you're someone who's kind of like on the offset, where you're like, oh, Last of Us is a good game, but I'm not so sure if I really want to watch a series, I would argue go ahead and watch it. It is really good. And that, I mean, Pedro Pascal is just fucking absolutely murdering it lately, man. He, like, every fucking nerd property that man is involved in, he gives it his goddamn all, his 120%, and he just fucking brings it. I think he is the best fucking person that could have brought on for like live action Joel, because, you know, Troy Baker's cool, he can act, but like he's too pretty. Pedro Pascal's got that rugged ass, old ass face where you're like, man, that's a good looking man, but he's old as shit. You know, he looks the part, he sounds the part, he's fantastic. Everyone fucking murdered it. This is absolutely something to keep your eye on. And it was a complete breath of fresh air coming off of the absolute miserable time I had with Velma. So, yeah.